Hello, parents, grandparents, future parents, and curious minds. Welcome to the podcast. I'm Steven.
I'm PJ.
And this is
Dad's Discuss.
All right, we got a good recording in of that intro.
We did. You guys are going to hear some funny audio edits towards the end of this one.
Maybe videos one day, but I got to clean up this basement before that happens.
I understand. Now, before we begin recording this, we always like to go through the intro every time to kind of get in the mindset. And Steven was having a little trouble this evening.
Yeah, we don't know how many takes that took. So we'll put it at the end for those curious, and you can judge for yourself how hard it is to record a podcast.
For the curious minds.
Oh, yeah. That one was left out multiple times. But yeah, today we'll talk about relationships, right? How we hold them together by trust and other means. I only wrote trust on the board on it. That's as far as my thought process went on relationships, as well as, kids dating someday. How do you handle that?
Yeah, I think the topic of relationships just in general, I don't think you realize just how many quote-unquote relationships you do have. This doesn't have to be a spouse or partner or a sexual relationship. You can have relationships with how you interact with your parents, with your in-laws, with your coworkers. So our whole life, you have multiple different types of relationships that you're constantly interacting with. And you obviously don't want to interact with one set the same way you do another. You have to kind of balance that with the way you interact with different people.
Yeah. And, one of the crucial ones in life to have is the topic for a later date friendship. So, friends play into there and how you maintain them and stuff. But we'll talk about that another time. Just a little teaser for everyone.
Absolutely. And I did want to point out, we have this, the whiteboard everyone knows. Well, we usually pick the topic we want to talk about just by looking up there and deciding. Today, Steven brought out a D&D dice, just rolled it, the number came up, and that's what we're talking about today.
Yep. It simplified our rock, paper, scissors contest.
That's right. So, Steven, relationships, you mentioned trust. I guess if that was the only one underneath that, what did you mean by trust?
I was just spitballing some ideas on how to maintain relationships and build trust between whether it's your partner or coworker or things like that. You end up sometimes giving up things so that you can build that trust, whether it be your time or your energy or your money. One example being losing some sleep to take care of the baby so that your wife can sleep a little longer and she can trust you to hold that baby and not panic and have an anxiety attack while she's trying to get some sleep.
Okay.
Or trust with me and you that I trust you to show up on time so that I can eat dinner while you sit there and stare at us.
Fair enough. No, that makes sense. All right. So trust you said something that I think to me was the word communication. You didn't say the word, but that's what I thought. One thing in any type of relationship that helps build trust, the key to it, in my opinion, is open communication.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if you're having a conversation with your spouse or a conversation with your kids. If you're trying to build that relationship trust, you have to have good communication.
That's a good point, because when we're both going through the toddler and early age stages, and you sit there and tell a kid to do something and forget that they're a kid and haven't understood the whole English language yet. Like just today, I was telling our oldest something, and she just looked at me with a blank face because I asked her to do something, and then she eventually was like, "What does that mean?" And I was like, "Oh, dang. I was starting to get fired up that you weren't doing it." You don't even know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I've definitely ran into that too. And it can be a little frustrating, and then you have to back up and be like, this is actually on me. I am not communicating in a way that they understand.
Right.
Or I'm trying to present a topic that may be too advanced, for their small minds.
Yeah, and I guess some of that, you do have to bow to the experts a little bit in the education field sometimes about when kids are ready to learn certain topics, even though a kid's mind is so easy to latch on to things and learn stuff, but there is like developmental stages that are important, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Like right now, learning a second language would be so much easier for them than us, right?
It would be.
But they can't develop advanced concepts like differential equations yet.
It took me a long time to develop that knowledge as well. Now, that's one thing I regret is not having learned fluently a second language at an early stage in life, just because I do know how beneficial it can be and how much easier it is to learn something like that when you're still, just going through life at an early stage and learning words. Just you can learn 2 or 3 words for that same object, just learning different languages.
Yeah, the danger we get into right now is that the oldest has a Spanish class in her curriculum, and now she thinks she can make up her own language.
Uh-huh.
So she's been just saying random things, and the only thing we can do is be like, "That's great, honey, but like, if you want me to do something, you're gonna have to say it in English, because I don't know what you're talking about. I don't mind you having an imagination and making up something, but I'm not gonna help you if you don't use English."
Yeah, no, I never thought about that. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's been fun for sure. I think she's kind of getting it now, but it's been definitely a couple months now since she started school to get her to convinced that she needs to, like, if she needs something, use English.
All right. Yeah, so relationships, besides the communication aspect and the trust aspect, what is something else you feel like is required to like have a strong relationship between anyone. Your children, your spouse?
What else comes above trust? No. Trust is probably the top one. Communication builds trust. What else builds trust? Long silences.
Long silences build trust. Well, there's no long silence in our household. We have too many kids.
Yeah, that means something's going on, right? If it's quiet.
That's right.
Man, I know I've listened to plenty of podcasts and stuff talking about these things, and now my mind's drawing a blank. This is why I have to prepare notes. What would be another thing to build relationships? I mean, time, commitment.
Yeah, no,
commitment's a big one.
That is a big one. I enjoy doing this podcast with you. I feel like it's beneficial to both us and hopefully beneficial to all of our listeners. But there is a time commitment.
Yeah.
Me and Steven do not live in the same city. Do have to make that commute. It does take both me and him away from our families, from our friends for a short time while we're recording, editing these episodes. So just in our relationship, making the time to be here for that is the same way in any other type of interpersonal situation. Making the time to be present, be engaged with the individual or the team that you're talking with. So that time commitment is a big one.
Yeah, and you brought up engagement and listening, being an active listener and, not consuming all the talking points and being the sole talker and, ensuring you're understanding someone else's feelings is a big relationship plus up too.
It is, yeah. And if you heard that sound, don't worry, it was just the ice cube in my old fashioned Steven made me. As he's talking, I am consuming my drink.
And vice versa.
Exactly.
But we're going to run out pretty quickly because it was quite delicious.
That was very good. Thank you for that. Yeah, active listening is definitely a big one to, continue to build that trust and strengthen any type of relationship. And I'd say that that's something that I have to actively make myself aware of. I tend to want to talk a lot, and I definitely have the mentality of while someone is talking, in my mind is trying to formulate the response before they've even finished. And so I do have to actively remind myself to fully listen and comprehend what's being said to me before my mouth tries to speak.
Yeah, we may have a little bit of it together, but I have a similar problem, which is probably why we wanted to start a podcast.
Yeah,
we want to talk. But the meme I saw the other day was a guy doing plank and just holding it, and the words around it were your brain with ADHD is that you've already finished the sentence, but you're holding it together so that you can let someone else talk. And I was like, hey, this describes me pretty well.
Yep.
I always got to hold my brain back from finishing the conversation. But,
yeah, so that is a big one. Active listening, engagement in different conversations.
yeah, and then circling back to the commitment a little bit, I just wanted to add to your list one more thing that, we have our living room down here that I've now put hybrid podcast studio in, so I've committed space and some money to do a side hobby. So building that relationship with you and the listeners for fun.
No, commitment. That's a
Words
good
are
one.
hard sometimes.
Especially when it comes to the relationship between you and your spouse, or you and your girlfriend, boyfriend, whoever. Like, commitment is huge, and in my opinion, it's one of the most important. Like, you can never have trust if a couple is not committed to each other.
In which you can be committed to the comment section down below, because what's building a parasocial relationship without commenting, and subscribing?
Oh, that was a good plug there, Stephen. Parasocial, that's an interesting word.
You never heard of that one?
No.
That's a new term since streaming and things and podcasts have become a thing. Parasocial relationships are just, between a listener or a viewer and the podcast host or video game streamer or whatever else you deem entertainment, I guess. Well, it's always kind of existed, because parasocial would also include movie actors. If you just loved Robin Williams and you just watched all of his stuff and you felt like you developed a relationship, but he doesn't know anything about you, but you feel like you know about him, and people reading tabloids and things like that.
No, I didn't know that, but that's interesting. And especially like you talked about that concept of having a type of relationship between a personality that you may have never met before. I didn't even think about it, but all right, I'll remember that.
Yeah. So that's a term you learn when you consume a lot of streaming services and you start thinking, oh man, I need to get out of this space, because you start growing attached to certain communities and things like that. But It's not a bad thing. A lot of entertainer people, build the community. They have a focus about building a community and having people to chat and things like that. Something that, if it happened with this podcast, I'm sure both of us would be happy about.
Yeah, that's interesting that you mentioned chat, because I know having older kids, I get to hear a lot of the new slang terminology and idioms, and that's a big one that they've started saying a lot is just calling a group of people chat. Like, whoa, chat, what are you talking about?
Really?
Yeah.
Because they've got so many group chats, maybe?
Or I just, because when people are doing streaming and stuff, that's what they say.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Because you got, was it tips and stuff on?
Yeah, or you can message the streamers on Twitch and things like that while they're interacting.
And then everybody's calm down chat.
Yep, exactly.
I didn't know it became slang eventually.
That's apparently so. One thing that made me think of, though, is how relationships change over time. I know from my experience, the way that I relate to my two oldest boys has dramatically changed from how I would relate to them when they were elementary and middle school age. So,
yeah.
And it's not something you actively think about. It's something that occurs over time. Both you and them you're getting older. There's a difference in interest and topics, what's going on day to day, and your interactions do change. And so that's really interesting to think about, because it's something that occurs without you actively doing it.
Yeah, I didn't think about that, but that's a good point, because you look at your kids, and I'm really good at the toddler phase. I'm sure I'll grow into the other phases, but I can really relate to just, letting your imagination fly and playing silly games and stuff like that. And that's a lot easier for my mindset sometimes than whatever teenagehood will bring with my kids. But I'm sure I'll adapt.
Oh yeah, you will. And it is fun, interacting with your toddlers, playing, imaginary scenarios with their toys and things like that. That is
Mm-hmm.
fun, but you'll grow into, eventually you won't do that as much, but then it's more, you know, current topics, talking about cars, things like that. So the way you interact with your children definitely changes, but it's
Yeah.
fun.
And you gotta change too. You can't just be like, "Oh, we're gonna keep playing imaginary when you're 16 or whatever." But
Exactly.
I mean, they may want to. You may go out and do some LARPing, but you never know.
That's
Depends on
right.
what they're into, like you said. They may hate that. They may never want to play Dungeons and Dragons.
No, Steven, I'm sure that would be a little sad about. That's okay.
I'm sure the kids will just humor me and run the nightly campaign, weekly campaign.
Even my older boys are still pretty big into anime, but even
Nice.
go back to like occasionally watching Pokemon and things like that. So
The good old days.
that's right. Dragon Ball Z. Noah loves Dragon Ball Z still
Oh
to this
man,
day. So
kid after my own heart.
oh
Then
yeah, all of them. Super Kai. I don't know if I can say this on the podcast. We're not getting money from them.
you can say whatever you want.
Thank you.
Just because they don't pay us doesn't mean you can't talk about it.
That's right.
As long as you don't start singing songs and we get copyright stricken.
Gotta catch 'em all.
That was a parody.
Yeah, so and it's the same way with any type of relationship as you grow, and I'm thinking mostly with my wife Kimber. Like, there's so much love there and respect and trust, but also as you continue to spend your life with that person, your interactions with them do change a little bit, and it
Hmm.
doesn't. It's not a bad thing. Like, it's a good thing, but
Yeah.
as you grow in your parenthood role, we still go on dates, so we still try and keep, aspects of when we first met. But there's a lot more like, just daily responsibilities, which is, when you first meet someone, you're not talking about, hey, what do we need from the store? Let's go grocery shopping type deal. So your relationships continue to grow. I won't say change. They grow.
They stack layers like an onion.
Like Shrek? What's with
Yeah.
all these references today?
Yeah, we that makes sense. We grow and change, hormones do a lot to women during pregnancy and birth and things like that, and sleep deprivation and survival and the following the schedule and then coming out the other side with kids that are grown, and now you gotta reestablish some bonds and things like that. You may not look like the same people when you went into having kids or marriage or anything like that.
Yeah, that is true.
So I think that's good advice for anyone to, I got the advice to never say the D word in the first year of a kid being born because there's so many hormones and things in play. And
For those of us who don't know what that means,
the
dick.
Divorce.
Oh yeah, no, but never,
Yeah.
never.
Yeah. Well, it's a common thing. Like, you're sleep deprived, you're tired, you're exhausted. You may both be working together, but it could tear you apart if you're not strong enough. So if you just remove that word from your vocabulary and never mention it, even in jest, because you could go down some dark roads. So
I think that's great advice. And as we brought up, even though we kept forgetting it, recording this intro, we hope that this podcast reaches, all dads or potential future dads, future parents. So yeah, I think that's great advice.
Yeah. I don't remember who gave that to us, but they were smart.
You mentioned survival, and I think we're kind of, I wouldn't say tangenting off relationships, but in terms of like relationships in general, once you have kids, I think at least for the first few months and even the first few years, especially if you've never been around children before, you do kind of go into like what I would think is more of like a survival mentality of, so much in my life is different. So much of my time commitment is devoted to this relationship, keeping this child healthy, active, happy. But what you don't want to do is stay in that mindset.
Yeah.
Like, you don't want to always be in a survival mode mentality, because unfortunately that could potentially lead to deterioration of other relationships, your relationship with your spouse, your relationship with your friends. So yes, occasionally you do go into that survivability mode, if that's even a word. But
I think so.
yes, but we don't want to stay in that mentality
Right.
for a long period of time.
Yeah, I would say, I don't know, if you were going to put a number on it, like the first 3 months to a year, right? Maybe at most.
Yeah.
You're trying to keep them alive in a fragile state.
Yep. An old friend and coworker of mine, we recently were texting again after probably about a year. He had let me know that him and his wife had a child during that time
Oh,
span.
cool.
She's now 10 months old. And he was bringing up some of those points. And, I was trying to give him the type of advice that I would give anyone. And I was like, in my opinion, once they get out of diapers, it's a lot more relaxing, less stressful. And so I was trying to, just remind him that, it's not permanent, that,
Yeah.
you may be feeling the effects of the stress and everything of being a first time parent. But your relationship with that child will change. And when you don't have to change their diapers 7 times a day,
Yeah.
it's going to change for the better.
And by that point, they're usually capable of, feeding themselves if you put food on the table and
Yeah,
things like that.
It's not crying for whatever they want. They usually have a vocabulary enough that they can point to things or say certain words. So it's not just, what does this type of cry mean?
Yeah.
Oh, you're hungry. Okay, well, let's go find a snack.
Right. Yeah, it starts to become the mental game over the physical game, right?
Exactly.
They're now meeting their mental needs.
Yeah. So you mentioned imaginative play, and I wanted to say this because Kimber has mentioned this to me before, and I thought it was a cool concept. I guess apparently a few studies, and don't quote me on it. Don't ask for any sources or sauce from this, but they say that children tend to get their endorphins by snuggling or cuddling with their mother and playing and interacting with their father.
Oh,
So
wow.
if your children as a father tend to come to you and always want to play and let's go outside, let's do this, it's because they tend to get their endorphins through interactive play with their fathers.
Let's punch you in the nuts accidentally.
That's...
And has occurred multiple times now that they're that height.
Then you can just put it on YouTube and become famous.
Yeah, when it's a daily occurrence. No, just kidding.
Then it's America's Funniest Home Videos, right?
She's gotten a lot better about it. But when she was that perfect height, she would just run at me. It was more like a headbutt, too.
Oh, no.
So I just have to, stick my hand out and be like, stop. Stop. Grow a few more inches.
That's funny.
But you gotta, that's me building trust with her. I gotta tell her what I need, her not to ram me in the... And our relationship will get better.
That's right. It's so funny now that I'm really actively thinking about it, just how much your relationship with your children changes over time. I'm thinking about my middle son. I'd say for the past 2 years, or even just the past year, had got up to the height of his mother. And so that was interesting as they had the same foot size, and he would put on her shoes and wear them occasionally and stuff like that, which is obviously something that they weren't doing when he was say 5.
Right.
But he now has grown enough that he has surpassed her in both height and shoe size. So that another change in their relationship is no more being able to share each other's clothes. He's now bigger than her.
Now he's stealing your shoes.
Eventually, so I have pretty big feet though.
Oh yeah. It's a competition.
Yes.
You know what they say about men with big... No.
Thank you, Stephen. On the podcast,
That might have to be edited. I don't know if we leave that in or not.
Way off topic, but I had heard that in general, children on average will be plus or minus 3 inches of the average height of both of their parents. So just a random fact that I happen to remember I wanted to share with the chat.
I do think our pediatrician brought that up the other day too. I think she was measuring our middle child and was like, oh yeah, she's on track to be between your guys' height, basically.
Okay.
Yeah, the average or whatever. So there's some science behind it, I guess. If a pediatrician's bringing it up too. So.
And I think mostly, it's mostly just I don't even know what the right term is, years and years worth of data to state like these are the parents' heights and these are the kids' heights. Like,
Right.
what's that bell curve look like?
Yeah, not sure what causes it or genetics or
Right,
whatever, but
exactly. This is
it's
just
a
data, empirical.
statistic. Yeah,
Yep.
interesting stuff. I was gonna say back to the changing over time thing. I just wanted to add one more anecdotal story with dating my current wife, who has a sibling that's 12 years younger than her. I started dating her when her sister was 10, and then now she's like getting close to graduating college, and now we talk financial stuff, when back then we talked secret handshakes and things like
Yeah,
that. And it's
and
like,
so essentially, like
yeah,
that is kind of like interacting with a child and watching them grow up because she was
yeah,
a kid when you first met your wife.
right. It was
Yep.
crazy. So I think that prepared me a little bit for fatherhood, knowing how relationships can change and watching someone grow up through that
Oh, definitely.
cycle. So
Definitely, and I know in a previous episode, I mentioned about how Kimber having children before I met her is what really helped push me into the idea of I could be a father, I could do this, watching her interact with the kids and having that knowledge, for a couple years before we got married of this is how you interact with children. So yes, having that experience did kind of prepare me, but I do know there are a significant portion of the population that kind of go into it blind, if you will.
yeah,
And so hopefully, there are plenty of resources. Make sure that you're reading what you can, listening, just
listening to dads discuss.
absolutely actively listening.
Actively. Yeah, that's good stuff. How about the topic of kids dating and understand? Oh, how about the topic of new drink?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, we're gonna put one of those music. That's right, and we're gonna come right back to this.
I'll find some smooth jazz or something.
Majority of people, and maybe I need to move this mic in case we want to add this to any podcast. Majority of the people that we knew, if I feel like, met either in college or after college.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
Yeah, not a lot of high school relationships, but I mean that's a norm.
I think it is very the
Like,
norm.
you don't know who you are at 18, so
Oh
how do you
gosh,
know who you
no.
want to marry?
Oh, thank God I didn't end up with the person that I was with when I was that age.
Yeah, but I mean, even so, you can grow to love someone. We're talking about relationships tonight. It's even if you were together at 18, you can experience life together and stay together eventually. But
Yep.
I mean, it's few and far between because you are going to change, and if you can't adapt to each other, or you make new friends that change you, and
Yeah,
one
that
side doesn't like that or the other.
that was definitely a big part of it. I'm glad that I waited until I found Kimber because it gave me that life experience. And I had had a few uh, serious relationships before then, but they were more just getting me prepared for the
Yeah,
relationship that I wanted to be in.
right.
Yeah.
And how do you pass that on to your children, I guess, is the topic of today, or the other half of the topic now that we're transitioning to our kids and their relationships.
Yeah, I think that me and my wife, we have very open communication with all of our kids, and for certainly our oldest, who is in a relationship and has been for quite a while with a very sweet girl. Uh, just having that open communication with the kids, so that if he ever had anything he wanted to talk to us about, I know he wouldn't hesitate and doesn't to bring up those types of things.
So you think just telling him that he can tell you, and or do you share some honesty and like communication towards your own past relationships or something, so he knows that he can trust you with his problems and things like that?
We
Would
do,
be
and
my
I think we
question.
have a unique situation in that he is my stepson, and he also knows his brother. Unfortunately, his father is a piece of shit,
Hmm.
and so we have to bring up those types of situations because there is a past there, and
Hmm.
he knows about it. So yeah, we've always had that type of open communication.
Hmm.
But then he sees how me and Kimber act together, and he's mentioned it before. He's like, I'm really happy that you guys are together, because I can just see the difference, because I've also seen some of the previous guys that she had been with.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah, I mean, we talked about that in the leadership episode of, leading by example. I guess it's similar for relationships. If you treat and act each other right in the home, then they're going to want that similar relationship when they get into the age of dating, right?
Absolutely. You want to be a good role model. I don't know. We haven't had a podcast about that, have we? Maybe we have. I don't know.
Yeah. Not outside of probably mentioning it in the leadership one, but I don't remember what we say on a day-to-day basis.
No, but I will say that in my opinion, because you had mentioned how do we deal with our children getting into the dating scene. Hopefully your children respect and trust you enough in your relationship with them that if they have any questions or just want to talk, they know that they can come to you, or, also hopefully they see good role models between you and your spouse to know how they should at least start the process of being involved in a more serious romantic relationship, because they have that role model's not the right word anymore.
That example.
Thanks,
shiny.
Stephen.
And then how do you feel about the concept of daughters wanting to date someone similar to their dad, and vice versa for sons dating someone similar to their mom?
I don't necessarily feel like I prescribe to that, and I don't know if there's ever been any serious study or if that's just like an old wives' tale.
I'm pretty sure it's a wives' tale,
Yeah,
but I want your opinion on it.
I would say that's not my opinion. In fact, I would say, at least in my case, I don't feel like my spouse is anything like my mother.
Yeah.
Do you feel that way?
No, I don't think so, but it's such a easy thing to make that connection because people are all so different, but we also share common threads. So it's like, you can, if you dig deep enough, you can see it and be like, oh yeah, my wife does this and so did my mom. But then you're like, that's one thing out of like 1,000.
Yeah.
So it's like the saying of you miss the forest for the trees or whatever, so you don't see the whole picture. But it's still a funny wives' tale nonetheless.
Yeah. One thing in terms of like relationships in general that I see is, because your friends tend to have generally the same interests as you, I do notice a similarity between my wife and the wives of my friends, or other friends that I have who are girls and other wives of my friends, just because for the most part, even if they weren't running in the same friend group before y'all met, they probably do now that you're married. And so that mixing of interactions and stuff. So maybe not so much spouses being similar to the father or mother of their significant other, but I do see big similarities between groups of friends and their spouses.
That's fair. Yeah, one piece of advice to give our kids and other parents to their kids, I don't know if you'll agree with this or not, is try your best not to date within your friend groups. Look for outside sources.
Yeah,
because that creates way too much drama.
I think so, but I think that's also something that most people can hear, and they're not going to.
No, they're not going to listen.
They're not going to comprehend it till after the fact. And there's so many television shows that go through that process.
Yeah.
You have a friend group, people start interdating, and it just doesn't usually end well.
It only works for Chandler and Monica. No one else.
I never watched that show. I think I made that mention, but I do remember How I Met Your Mother. I feel like that was part of it.
Yeah. That ending was disappointing. But people have explained to me why it's good, and I still don't know how I feel.
No, it's interesting talking about how your children may view relationships and how we as parents feel about it, because I do have that experience having older children.
Right.
My oldest, Braden, has been involved in, more serious relationships. And as I mentioned, is involved in one right now. And my middle son, too. Maybe not serious, but, he's had a couple girlfriends, which is a lot earlier than I did. But I'm not as cool as him and never will be, so I get it.
You've taught him all the secrets, I guess.
No, he knew more of the secrets than I did. No, but
Well,
so
women are more complex than we think. So
so on that topic though, is do you feel as parents that it is justified that you set like an appropriate age limit or rules around, like, say you're in 8th grade, which obviously you're not driving, things like that. If one of your children, boy or girl, comes to you and says, hey, I've been seeing this someone recently, we're calling each other boyfriend and girlfriend, we'd like to go to a movie together, are you willing to drive us, and things like that, like, do you
yeah,
think you're going to be the parent that's going to say, like, yeah, that's fine, I'll buy you the tickets and you guys can sit in a different row than me, things like that? Or you're going to be more, you're too young to do this type of stuff?
no, I draw the line at the buying the tickets portion. If you're gonna take someone on a date, you're using your
Okay,
own
all
money.
right.
I may chip in a little bit if it's your birthday or something. But no, yeah, I think 7th or 8th grade, I would be completely okay with it. I mean, our lived experiences that at that age are just trying to figure out how it works. And if you stifle it, then they're going to be stunted like I was, where I didn't start dating until like junior, senior year of high school. And I was just a lost puppy.
Okay, all right.
No one wanted to know me back then. You knew me back then.
I did know you back then. I wanted to know you, but sure. No, I think that's funny. You mentioned lived experiences, and I definitely feel that way because I would consider myself more of a late bloomer. I didn't have a serious relationship until senior year of high school, but my middle son has had relationships where he's, asked to go to, high school football games because he knows his girlfriend's going to be there so they can, spend the evening hanging out at the football game. I wasn't doing that at his age, but
Right.
if that's what you want to do and he enjoys it, I'm happy.
Yeah. So I get that. I would probably be that way. I don't know if I would probably drive them. Maybe. I'll sit in the back of the theater and throw popcorn at them or something. We'll see. Of course, I'd give advice and things like that. I've got several years before then, but I guess it's going to fly by before I know it. So I better be prepared, right?
It will. It absolutely. And it'll happen probably when you least expect it. And that's also the advice that I tell most people that may not even be in a relationship yet. If you've stumbled upon this podcast and, you're not even in a relationship, the best advice I could ever give someone is that you will find the right person when you least expect it. And I know that's also something that you're not going to comprehend until it occurs.
Right.
But that is
It
true.
sounds cliche, but I don't know. It's a way to game the system.
Yeah.
But I think you probably have to be honest with yourself.
You do. Takes a lot of introspective.
That worked for me too. I was like, I'm done. Screw this. And then things just happened.
Yep.
Just fell into place.
So the changing relationships, how we deal with relationships with our children. This has been a great topic, Stephen.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think.
The only thing left is talking about our relationships with our parents, but that might be too deep for today.
That one might have to be
the kid
a
to
separate
parent
topic.
Yeah.
Yes, where we are the kids and they are the parents.
Yeah. So that goes out to all those grandparents out there. We may save that topic for another day.
Just like we're going to save the topic of friendship, and when we say friendship, we mean maintaining current friendships at our age with all the other responsibilities of being a father and life in general. We'll have a separate podcast on that for sure.
Yeah, making friends with the kids' parents.
Which is, I would say that's probably more along the lines of this one too, like relationships. How do you interact with other children's parents? And I know not so much for our youngest because she just started preschool this year, so we really haven't had a lot of parent friends that weren't already our friends, such as you, Stephen. But with the older kids, for sure, we've already had some of those interactions. I will say, at least in my experience, that it has not been. It's not usually situations where you instantly connect with them and you're like, hey, let's go grab a drink on Saturday. Yeah. It's more formal.
Okay.
It is.
Yeah. I think with our preschool, we're trying to test the waters on that. So when they created like a little chat with the parents to help out in the classroom, and I'm like, we should get together at one of the bars and hang out for a bit just to see. Because I know at least a few of the kids in the class have gotten really attached to each other already, and starting pre-K in a school that goes pre-K to eighth grade.
You're going to
It's
develop
like,
pretty close
yeah.
relationships. Yeah.
So it's like,
Well,
you
how
better get
receptive
to
were
know
those parents to that invitation?
I think out of like, was there 12 kids in the class? 3 sets of parents said that sounds fun.
Okay.
So pretty good ratio.
Nice.
Of course, there's probably people that don't monitor the chat as often, so you never know. We'll see if something happens.
Okay.
Regardless, if Annicelli has, the desire to have one of the friends over, we'll obviously invite the parents too and, get to know them, sort of thing.
That's interesting. And another aspect that I wanted to bring up that you may have not seen yet with your children's ages is the relationship you have with your children's friends. So my boys are old enough that they have had, very tight social bonds with friends, having spend the night parties, going out doing activities such as going to the football games, going to some of these places like Dave and Buster's, things like that, and how you as the parent interact with their friends is an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, that'll be definitely fun. I don't have too many examples except for my in-laws and my parents, and I like to think, I would hope that I give the impression to our friends' kids the same as my in-law. That is, anytime they come over, they don't leave hungry, sort of thing.
That's good. No, that's
and
good.
So they have a good time with my kids, and they don't leave hungry because there's always something in the pantry or food on the table or something.
Yeah.
But aside from, I don't have to be friends with them, but I don't want to screw up my kids' relationship.
Right. You don't want to be overly hard on anyone. You don't want you don't want the friends of your child to see you constantly disciplining them, or also being the one who's disciplining the whole group.
Right.
But
that's a tough one because you can't let effectively strangers to you into your house and destroying your stuff.
Right.
But at the ages that I'm at with the kids, if they come over, it's the parents are going to be over too, right?
Right.
So
and eventually
they can
that
do
won't
the
be
disciplining.
the case.
Yeah, that won't be the case, and it's like, I guess I call the parent and be like, "Can I kick them out of the house? You can come get them." I don't know how to handle that yet, so you might have to give me some advice on that.
Just another changing growth aspect of the relationship, especially with my boys. Some of their friends, they've been friends with, for 3-4 years now. And so you kind of have developed a rapport with their friends. They know you. And I hope that I come across, and I think I do, as, someone who can be trusted, someone who's fun, someone who is going to always provide pizza and food at the house if they need. But, someone who, jokes around with them. If they're playing a video game, I might sit down and play around or something with them.
Yeah.
So those types of interactions.
Asking permission, of course, right?
Oh,
don't just be like, "You're letting me play because I'm going to whip your butt in Smash Bros."
It's usually them inviting you. They're like, "All right, you want some of this? Come on, sit in." I'm like, "Okay."
Right.
Are we playing Counter-Strike? Oh no, it's COD 6. Oh geez.
Let me show you how to do it the old school way.
Right. What is this? NCAA 2005.
Oh man, that's a good point. That's a lot of stuff to think about. I know, when you get too deep in the parenting world and forums and things like that, and discussions with your wife, the general mentality of parents these days is the terrified thoughts around sleepovers, right? Like, I don't know if you've heard a lot of that traffic that people are like, sleepovers were so dangerous back in the day because you only had one set of parents there, and anything can happen and stuff like that. And I was like, man, when I grew up, parents left you alone, sort of thing. But when everything's televised and whatnot, and one bad thing happens, it puts a lot of fear and doubt into parenting.
No, I would say I haven't heard that. And it's interesting because both of our older boys have had multiple sleepovers, usually at our house, though. But one thing that I have not done as much is in terms of like the relationship. I have, pretty good rapport with all of those kids, but maybe not so much the parents. Now, there is certain kids whose parents I do have like their phone numbers with and will talk with occasionally. But I will say there are other friends of both of the boys that I have never met the parents of those kids before.
Interesting.
Yeah. And even though they are spending the night at my house. They trust me, I trust them. We have that rapport, but I don't know who their parents are.
Interesting. So maybe that just comes down to when they reach a certain age, the parents trust their kid or trust. Well, it's got to be trust the kid if you don't know them at all, right?
I think so, and I think that age is mostly once they start to drive. I at least know of the parents of most of the friends that Noah has. Braden, I know the kids very well, but I may have never met the parents. But they're at the age that they're driving to see each other, so
Yeah.
you don't have to interact with the parents as much anymore. And you're
Mm.
hoping that they are starting to develop into their own person and may
Yeah.
not really need their parents as much.
That's true, because your kid's like Braden's making money now, right? So
Exactly.
worst case scenario, it's better that he wants to party at your house than renting a hotel and
Oh, absolutely. And they
making
know
things
that.
worse, sort of
Yep.
thing.
And I always want to be that person, and he knows that. We have that relationship that, and me and my wife have talked about this many times. I would much rather, if you're going to have friends spend the night and just, have a good time, I want you to be here at our house because I know that they're going to be safe. I know that there's going to be food available,
Yeah.
things like that. So I want to be that parent, and I feel like we have been.
Yeah, and you have so much space and whatnot.
Exactly,
So there's
yep.
room for everybody.
But the safety aspect, you had mentioned about people maybe saying that sleepovers could have potentially have been dangerous. At least it is under a roof that I know is
Yeah.
a safe place.
Right. Well, you're hosting them.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and especially when they get a driver's license, it's like you start to lose control anyways, like you said. So you're better off asking them to invite their friends over than going to their friend's house or some shady barn party or something like that.
Yep. But I will
Which happens in the town you live in.
I
I'll
will
make you
concede
aware.
that certainly occurs to this day, and I remember going to my share of country bonfires, when
Yeah.
I was younger. But I was going to concede that the occasions of situations where kids younger than that have big group sleepovers, I don't see occurring anymore. I don't think churches are doing lock-ins like they used to. I don't think
I
the Boy
forgot
Scouts are
lock-ins
doing
existed.
lock-ins inside gyms.
Yeah.
And I do think that's a product of our generation growing up with some bad examples and experiences,
That's true.
unfortunately. And so I don't think that you're seeing those type of events as much.
That's true. I forgot about lock-ins.
Exactly. They don't happen anymore, So I would say sleepover type events or really having relationships with your friends doesn't occur nowadays until middle school and onwards. At the elementary age, at least in today's society, if you're going to see friends of your kids, it's mostly because their parents are there involved in the mix.
That's fair. And before we go, I know we've gone a little bit long on this one, but hang with us just a little bit longer. I have one more topic to ask you about. You mentioned sleepovers, but there's another aspect to sleepovers, which is school field trips over a weekend or summer camps that they sleep at and things like that. If you're okay with that, I guess why would you not be okay with? I mean, it's a little bit different of an environment, right? You got camp counselors versus somebody else's parents, but where's that trust level on a parent versus some counselor that might be watching them or might not be watching them?
Yep, and I think that's why, you getting involved in your child's education and choice of school is a big part. I'm sure you would feel more comfortable in that situation with your children going to the school they are because you were involved in that choice. And it may not be that way with someone who just happens to be sending their kids to the closest public school because that's what they're zoned for.
True.
Because you probably have a better rapport or a better understanding of the types of professors and administration that school has than someone who's just, living down the street from, PS 118 or whatever.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so you got, and with smaller class numbers, you got almost forced relationships with people that are going to be on trips and things like that.
Yep. I will say I don't remember taking overnight school trips until late middle school. I would say 7th grade is when I first
true.
had that occur.
Yeah, like DC trips and things like
Yeah,
that.
and I believe it was always focused around the band too. I don't remember it
Yeah, oh
being
yeah, band trips was
yeah.
the
I don't
main
remember a
one.
general school or class field trip that was longer than just a day.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, that's fair. Most of the overnight stuff's gonna occur in the private institutions like your church and youth group and Boy Scouts, like you said, and any other extracurriculars like gymnastics or something like that, or
Yeah,
track and field.
traveling ball teams, a big
Yeah.
one.
So, yeah, it's tough, man. I don't want to keep you too long, but you got anything else on the subject?
No, I think this is one that we may get a chance to run a few more episodes on, and I invite chat and all of our listeners to like, comment, and give us any other ideas or topics that you may want us to discuss, because our entire world is revolved around relationships and how we interact with the rest of the human race. So this could become quite a big topic if we really wanted it to be.
Yeah, we uncovered, we never even talked about coworker relations. We never talked about grandparents and friendships. So that's 3 topics that probably could have a whole podcast.
I think I'm going to go ahead and call it. We don't need to roll the D&D dice. We'll come back to this one, but we also don't want to keep you guys all day.
Sounds good, man. Well, thanks for coming on.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for listening to Dad's Discuss.
Please like and subscribe wherever you are listening.
Also, comment any topics you would like us to discuss and share with your friends and family.
Finally, if you would like to be on the podcast or discuss any topics, please reach out via our contact information below.
So, yeah, it'd probably be different than friendships, because friendships is
I would
how do you
think
maintain
that's what I
a
was
specific relationship.
Exactly. We can do either of those ones.
Force them into a podcast.
It does get me to come up here a lot more often.
I know. I get to see you more.
Which is nice.